Okay, so I'm going to be talking about the question, why is Lenny compared to an animal? Now, this happens predominantly in chapter 1. So we're going to go through some quotations where Lenny is compared to an animal and talk about them as we go. So the first comparison is quite early on in chapter 1, where Lenny is introduced, and he walks in and it says the way a bear drags his paws. Now, a bear is quite a large animal. It's powerful and strong. It could be considered to be dangerous. It could be said to be unable to see the consequences of its actions and of its own strength. So that's quite an appropriate comparison to Lenny, because he is very large and powerful, and he is unable to see the consequences of him using his own strength, as we see later on in the novel, where he hurts Curly's hand and obviously kills the puppy and Curly's wife. Now, the word drags could suggest that there's a lack of control, that he isn't aware of how he moves his body or isn't able to control the way that he moves his body. Paws also suggests the size of his hands. Later, the fact that he isn't kind of able to understand the way that he moves around, the scene where it is reflected in the scene where he hurts Curly's hand and kills the puppy and Curly's wife. He's not aware of what he's doing. He isn't able to control his own strength. A little bit later on, when Lenny is having a drink out of the river, it says that he is snorting into the water like a horse. Steinbeck seems to be really hammering home this idea that Lenny is compared to the animal world. It's almost as if he's suggesting that he doesn't belong in the world of men, and certainly he connects Lenny strongly with the world of animals through the whole of chapter 1, and it makes me wonder whether he's trying to suggest that Lenny isn't able to exist successfully in the world of men because he doesn't understand it. He's closer to an animal than he is to a man. Now, slightly later, Steinbeck says that Lenny dabbled his big paw in the water. This comes across, particularly the word dabbled, as quite playful and childish, which might suggest Lenny's innocence or perhaps his naivety. Paw, repeated again, is animalistic. And the way that he plays with the water in this way is where Steinbeck is creating a sympathetic character. We worry for him. We understand that he is vulnerable. We understand that he doesn't really mean to do the things that he does. And we worry what kind of trouble he's going to get into next. He's also said that he is compared to a terrier, kind of small dog. It says, slowly like a terrier who doesn't want to bring a ball back to his master. Now, a terrier is quite a loyal dog. This could be comic imagery. He's quite excitable. He's obviously very loving. And this is a very clear description of how Lenny and George's relationship works. George is the master. Lenny is almost kind of his pet. George cares for Lenny, and Lenny couldn't survive without him. This is actually quite a humorous description. I don't know about you, but I certainly can see in my mind the way that Lenny is moving. But it makes us connect with Lenny. This is so important. It's so important that when he eventually breaks Curly's wife's neck, it's so important that we are worried about what will happen to Lenny and George and with their dream, rather than going, oh my goodness, he's killed somebody, he must be lynched or strung up. Lenny himself seems to understand that perhaps he's not right in the world of men. He says, I'll go off in those hills, right up in those hills, and live by myself. Maybe Steinbeck is suggesting that Lenny is better off in the wild. He certainly seems to find it very difficult to exist in the world of men. He doesn't seem to understand how to act in this very vicious and dangerous world. The 1930s, American Great Depression is not a place for sympathy and understanding. He laughs at the wrong time. He offends Curly by doing that. He misunderstands things. People don't realise how dangerous he could be, like Curly's wife, and Slim to a certain extent. And lastly, second to lastly, George shows Steinbeck shows what George gets from the relationship. So he says, I want you to stay with me, Lenny. Somebody would shoot you for a coyote if you were by yourself. Steinbeck explores what George gets. Lenny stopped him from being alone. He wants him with him. And although later on he talks about what his life could be like without Lenny in it, you kind of get the sense that this is a comfortable relationship. And though he's fearful, he doesn't want to be on his own. A coyote, if you're not sure, is an American wild dog, a bit like a dingo. And lastly, we can see that he does actually love George. I'd leave it all for you. This is when he's talking about the ketchup. You could cover your beans with it and I wouldn't touch none of it. He senses that he's done wrong here and he tries to make it right, bless him, by saying that he would give George all of the ketchup. So in the end, I think we can see that Lenny is compared to an animal to really bring out certain aspects of his character and to develop his character in chapter 1, to make us feel sympathetic towards him and to foreshadow some of the events later on in the novel.